and gentlemen, before 1976, India was defined as sovereign, democratic republic. After 1976, India is defined as sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. The Constitution of India has been at the center of a huge political discourse, particularly ahead of elections. Today, the Supreme Court rejected petitions by 3, including Subramaniam Swamy, former BJP Rajya Sabha MP, wanting to remove the words secular, socialist from the preamble to the Indian Constitution. Tomorrow, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will participate in the Constitution Day celebrations in the Supreme Court. And one often sees Rahul Gandhi's references to the Constitution during his political messaging. The Supreme Court stated, "We do not find any legitimate cause or justification for challenging this." For challenging the constitutional amendment nearly 44 years later. The petition was rejected. And the CJI had some important observations, including socialist and secular identities. By means of the 42nd Amendment being part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution, the very soul of India. The petitions argued that these terms were included by an amendment enacted during the emergency of 1975 to 1977. My throat is totally choking with the pollution. But returning to the discourse that we are talking about, and that is the emergency. So the petitioners have argued that these terms were included by an amendment enacted during the emergency and lacks legitimacy, was part of the original preamble. It shouldn't have been made public, or it shouldn't have been included without public consultation. And socialist secular is not aligned with India's historical context. The court, though, made it very clear, socialism in India means welfare state and doesn't prevent private sector from thriving in India. It's different from other countries, stated the court, and that secularism is part of Constitution's basic structure. Secularism is essential to India's constitutional identity and need not be seen from the lens of Western countries. In India, it is promoting live and let live philosophy and encourages coexistence among religious communities. Supreme Court also said these defining terms in the Indian preamble were part of basic structure, a term that essentially means amendments by the parliament cannot change or alter the basic structure. So is this about political rhetoric, or is India's identity up for debate? Tonight joining me are Karan Verma, author, Harshdeep Khadial, spokesperson for Congress, Deshratan Nigam, lawyer, and Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. Sanjay Hegde, first to you. It's not the first time that the Supreme Court has made these observations, and it's not the first time that these petitions have reached the Supreme Court. This is now increasingly not only becoming part of political rhetoric, but this is also increasingly becoming part of public discourse. What do you make out of this, Sanjay Hegde?
Well, what I make out of this is that the Supreme Court says you can amend any part of the Constitution, including the preamble. The fact that it was done during the emergency by the 42nd Amendment does not really matter. And as a historical fact, this is not what the Supreme Court says, but history also records that the 42nd Amendment was sought to be undone by the 44th Amendment. Those amendments which the then Janata Party did not like, and the Janata Party at that point of time included Atal Bihari Vajpayee and L.K. Advani, who were members of the cabinet. They undid most of the 42nd Amendment, but left this amendment untouched. This amendment only recognized the position that already existed. The Indian Constitution, even without the word secular in the preamble, was a secular document. Ambedkar specifically says so. There is a in the Constituent Assembly, there is a passage where Mr. K.T. Shah asks him, why socialist, this, that, and the other. And Ambedkar says that, look, the document is what it is. And Ambedkar did not think that it was specifically necessary to include these words in the preamble, because the Constitution itself spoke for itself. Thereafter, in 1973, the Supreme Court in Keshavananda held that secularism was part of the basic structure. So therefore, in 76, when the amendment was passed, it was only that which was recognized by the Supreme Court, which was specifically put in the preamble. Now, let me just turn the argument around. If you had taken these two words off the preamble, or it may be one day that there will be a government with a majority big enough to again amend the Constitution and take these two words away. Even then, what is left in the Constitution, unless even those portions are amended, will continue to be secular. And let's assume that there is a constitutional amendment which says that Hindus alone will be the first citizens of this country, that India is a Hindu Rashtra. Then those amendments can be challenged in the Supreme Court on the ground that they violate the basic structure of the Constitution. So this is the constitutional position, and all the Supreme Court said is, we don't think that this petition has merit, and therefore we dismiss it.
Deshat and Nigam, would you agree with what Sanjay Hegde said? I'm asking you this question again because the court made some very important statements, and one of them was, there is no reason to see a petition like this after 44 years. Why rake this up?
Sneha, let me make it very clear. One thing, a constitution which creates and carves out the concept of a minority without talking about the majority is not a perfect constitution. Yes, we have lived with it. We have worked this constitution. Supreme Court says it's a part of basic structure, so we have to follow it. Any constitution which recognizes minority has to recognize majority. And that majority is the Hindu majority. And that is probably was the reason the word secular was not included in the preamble originally. And therefore, yes, Hindu by nature is secular. We recognize all forms of worships. These were all the parts of discussions in the Constituent Assembly. But without recognizing the majority, when you develop a concept of minority without defining who is a minority, what are the bases of minority, then the concept becomes very flawed. And that is what has happened here. Yes, 44 years of delay and subsequent actions of the parliaments and the government have given a kind of stamp of approval. But this is a concept I'm talking about conceptually. And therefore, the flaws that come into the constitution is that the temples of Hindus can be controlled by the government, but mosque and other institutions cannot be. This is one flaw. The grants cannot be given to Hindu institutions to teach religion, but it can be given to other minority institutions to teach their own religion. This is the second flaw I'm talking about. So these are the flaws which are there in this, and that is why certain petitions are still pending, taking the temples out of the control of the governments and things like that. I agree so far as socialism is concerned. We have developed our own concept of welfare state, socialism, where private-public partnership is also there. The private enterprise is also there. So it's a concept of a welfare state that we are following. To that extent, I am with the Supreme Court. However, the word secular becoming a part of basic structure of the Constitution, which cannot be amended, is something which I do not agree, because Parliament is supreme. Parliament tomorrow may decide. And in fact, Sanjay Hegde has clearly said, if tomorrow a government comes with a kind of majority which may again, change the Constitution and brings certain changes. However, once the Supreme Court sets a basic structure and Keshav Nanda Bharti and S.R. Bombay are there, then you have to have a much larger bench to deal with that kind of an amendment, whether it again is a basic structure or not. A larger constitution bench has to be constituted. So I believe since 44 years have passed and the ball has been thrown back to the parliament again, it's a kind of an open question, but for the time being, since Supreme Court says so, we have to follow.
Karan Verma as well as Harshpreet Karia, just give me a few more minutes. I need to go back. And this question is to both Sanjay Hegde as well as Deshratan, because, look at the argument that Deshratan said right now, that temples can't be governed by Hindus alone, and mosques and others can be governed by, their own bodies. That's one argument. Recognition of majority not being recognized. How does this fit into the explanation? I'm trying to understand this, because secularism doesn't mean recognition of only minorities. Secularism doesn't recognize only people of a particular religion. Secularism says all religions. So where does majority and minority come into this picture? Secondly, you brought in the control of temples and mosques. Correct me if I'm wrong. All these are subject to legislation, and that's why you have Prime Minister Modi today saying that Waqf has no place in the constitution. Sanjay Hegde first, please.
I don't really engage with WhatsApp concepts. First and foremost, secularism is state behavior which says that the state will not have any religion. It does not say that the state will not regulate religion, right? Regulation of religion, insofar as Hindu temples are concerned, is specifically built in the constitution because you have provisions against untouchability. All Hindu temples by the constitution are required to be open to all members of the Hindu faith. Now, this constant thing of, Hindu temples can be are taken over by the government is all bunker, because right under all those acts, all those various bodies which run the temples are all consist primarily of Hindus. It is to prevent certain facets of the Hindu religion which promoted untouchability and things like that, that you needed to have regulation. Now, you take it's not as if other religious endowments are not do not have government control. Who are the Waqf boards? The Waqf boards are not appointed by the community themselves. The Waqf boards are appointed by the governments. Each government says, okay, as far as the Waqf is concerned, these members of the Muslim community, one has to be a Shia scholar, one has to be a Sunni scholar, read the Waqf Act. Appointments are made there also by the government. They each, or if you have a Christian thing, they would be under the Charities and Other Endowments Act. There are several facets of religious institutions which are entirely commercial in nature. You decide to buy oil for a puja. If you decide that you will only buy it from your friendly grocer who gives you a commission, then can devotees' monies not be saved better by having governmental control, administrative control? So there are several facets of religious practice which are not essential religious practice, which can and are controlled by governments across religions. You have the Sikh Gurdwara Act, which took away the Sikh Gurdwaras away from the control of Hindu Mahants. So each of these legislations has a context. So don't tell me that secularism is one-sided application on one side and nobody else gets touched. It only says that the government is equidistant from all religions and will treat each person equally. That's all. And I don't agree with this thing that, just because we are Hindu, that we are equally, we are secular. We may have an equal distance between
Right, Deshatam Nigam.
No,
Yes,
just let me complete my thought. Let me complete just this thing.
Okay. I think Sanjay Hegde
Yeah.
is just finishing his
Yeah.
remark. Please finish.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we are indifferent to who worships Vishnu and who worships Shiva. But there are plenty of Hindus of the Deshratan Nigam variety who say that you have a choice between Vishnu and Shiva. But if you go to Allah or Christ, then they have a problem because they are from somewhere outside Bharatvarsha. These kind of distinctions are what have created this problem.
Sneha, let me come into the picture. Mr. Hegde has not specifically answered.
Yes, please, Deshatam Nigam. In fact, let me just ask you. No, just a minute. Let me just also ask this. And the same question that I asked him, I want to ask you. Of course, you are saying secularism doesn't recognize majority, but isn't secularism exactly that? And as Hegde says, Mr. Sanjay Hegde says, everybody has the freedom to worship whoever they want. You may choose to worship X, Y, the other may choose to worship A, B. It doesn't have anything to do with secularism. It's as long as all are coexistent and the state doesn't use religion for political power, which of course is a totally gone game when it comes to our politicians in India. That's a different debate altogether. But Deshratan Nigam, please respond.
Well, let me specifically answer Mr. Hegde with some of my more WhatsApp gyan to him, as he labels it, without being condescending on him. First thing, he has not been able to specifically answer why there is no Mosque Act to control mosque, and why only temples through legislation. These are constitutional flaws I'm talking about. Secondly, why grants can be given to Muslim or other Christian affiliated, institutions where they can teach their own religion, where it cannot be done in a Hindu institution. They cannot receive those grants. These specific questions, and here the state has to keep equidistant. It has not in terms of religion. On these two, I was very specific, where he failed to answer.
Let me answer.
I have to. I'm sorry, I'm interjecting you. I know I gave Sanjay Hegde a lot of time. I will allow you to. No, sir, I will allow. I'm coming to you only, but just one. Allow me. Just indulge me in this one small comment that I want to make because it's in continuation with what you are saying. It's important, and therefore I'm just adding. I'm coming back to you only. You can itself answer. You may be a Hindu and you may be in a minority in a particular place and you have the right to establish your religious, your educational institution and get the grant. Isn't that the truth?
Of course. I speak Tulu.
Okay. Allow Deshratan Nigam to speak, sir. Sir, Mr. Hegde, allow Deshratan Nigam to speak and I'll come to you, Mr. Hegde. Deshratan Nigam.
Please tell me, is Hindu a minority in Mizoram? Or in most of the North state, they have not been declared, so they do not get any benefits. Is Hindu a minority in Jammu and Kashmir? No, they do not get benefits. These are the flaws that I'm talking about. Have an equidistant by the state of all the religions, but it is not happening. That is what I'm talking about, which Mr. Hegde calls it a WhatsApp gyan or concepts. These are these are challenging questions which are constitution and the parliament has to deal with it. These are burning questions which are pending in Supreme Court, admitted, and the arguments will be heard on that. So let's not just wish it away. These are very serious questions, and it is inherent, let me tell you, a constitution which recognizes minority clearly by its names, does not recognize majority.
30 seconds more,
indirectly, it accepts India to be a Hindu majority nation. When we talk of Muslim Islam,
any section of Indians based on language, religion, culture can be either a minority or a majority. As a Kannadiga in Delhi, I can establish a Kannada school. And that would be constitutionally protected. So the same person can have a majority identity as well as a minority identity. So all this majority minority only in terms of religion, that is only what one party seems to think. Secularism as well as pluralism looks at individuals and individuals in their collective identities. They may have minority aspects, they may have majority aspects. The Constitution envisages protection of their specific distinctness, either in script, in religion, in culture, or in language. So this kind of Unitarianism of Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan is where the problem lies.
I never said so, Mr. Hegde. I focused on religion because it is the religious discrimination that is taking place. That is, have equidistance and afford the same kind of opportunity to Hindus where Hindus are minorities in states. That is not happening. That is what I was talking about. But you sidetracked it, took it to the linguistic aspect.
Deshat and Nigam as well as Sanjay Hegde. I'll have to move away from both of you for a bit. Let me just go to Karan Verma and Harshdeep Khadial. Both of them have been waiting very patiently, and I'm sure you're hearing this discourse also very carefully. Karan Verma, tomorrow is the Samvidhan Divas. Prime Minister Modi, the President of India, the Chief Justice of India, all are going to be celebrating that day. The Constitution is going to be remembered, is going to be revered, is going to be spoken about. But why are different people
Sneha,
from the BJP or so on, related organizations wanting certain descriptive words of what is seen as a basic structure of India's identity want to be changed?
So, Sneha, I'll start from where Mr. Sanjay Hegde left. He's talked about K.T. Shah talking about the inclusion of the words secular and socialism. And he very conveniently glossed over what Ambedkar replied to him. I'll quote to him. When K.T. Shah on 15th November 1948 proposed that India should be called a secular federal socialist union of states, what did Ambedkar say? And I'm quoting now. He said, if socialism were added to the preamble, it would restrict the liberty of future generations to choose their path. He said, it cannot be laid in the constitution itself because that is destroying democracy altogether. B.R. Ambedkar. That is what he said, that you cannot impose an ideology on the functioning of a nation. What is socialism? Socialism, if we go by the definition, yes, we can give it our own twist, we can give it some other context, but largely it means social ownership of means of control.
Whether for socialism or for secularism, we have. And that's a given. India has given its own connotations to it.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. There's a delay, Sneha. Okay, no, secularism.
Karan, you are saying that you may go ahead and define these words to your own liberty, but that's the truth. India has defined these and defined them according to their interpretations and their social indices.
So this is what B.R. Ambedkar ji has said. I did not make this up. This is what he said to this discussion on socialism. And what did he say to secularism, by the way? And not just B.R. Ambedkar. What did Nehru say about secularism? He said that we cannot adopt this word secular because it has a Western construct, which means separation of state and religion. And he also further said that Article 16 and Article 19 are enough. We don't need to use the word secular. So this is coming from the so-called paragons of secularism and the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru, with all due respect to them. Now, Sneha, let's be honest. Are we actually a secular state as they define secular? I mean, the constitution that we talk about, our national flag that we talk about, the motto is Satyamev Jayate. That's coming from our Upanishads. When we enter our parliament, what do we see written there? Dharma Chakra Pravartanai. That is again coming from our Upanishads. Our judiciary, the motto of our Supreme Court is Yato Dharmas Tato Jaya. Another thing that comes from our culture. So, when we say secular, it doesn't comply with the Indian concept. Now, the Supreme Court has upheld it. Fine, the Supreme Court is supreme, but not infallible in the words of Justice J.S. Verma. So, we have to abide by that. But in 1976, when this 42nd Amendment came around, did we have a robust opposition? Did we have a discussion on it? And are we really socialist today? We are a mixed economy. We are capitalist in certain states. That's why in 1991, when P.V. Narasimha Rao took the bold step, and I have to commend P.V. Narasimha Rao, we opened our economy. We did go for privatization. So, it's saying that we are secular and socialist and we have a different meaning of it. I think it's funny.
But that's what the court said today, that socialistic here means a welfare. It doesn't mean a full-on, it means welfare where the private can also thrive. But Harshpreet, please respond, Advocate Khadial. How do you look at the arguments which is being said? Essentially also, you have Karan making the argument, is India really secular? And I'm asking you this question with great responsibility because, again, this is becoming part of public discourse as well. You have an argument of Indian culture versus secularism. While are the two really as polarized or divided or apart as is being made to?
Well, I'd like to start by the absence of the Bharatiya Janata Party spokesperson in this debate. Why is the Bharatiya Janata Party not willing to participate in such important debates is the question. That's number one. Number two, a former senior BJP leader was one of the petitioners in this case. And after the order came and the words secular and socialism stayed in the constitution, I did not see a single BJP leader welcoming the order. And then they did not send their spokesperson. Therefore, the stand of the Bharatiya Janata Party is unclear. Number two, you see that on the opening day of the new parliament, there are a couple of instances that we need to see in order to ascertain as to what the stand of the Bharatiya Janata Party is. You remember, on the September 19, 2023, on the opening day of the new parliament building, copies of the constitution were given to MPs. They did not contain the words secular and socialism. That's a matter of grave concern. And that is fiddling with our preamble, fiddling with our constitution. Number two, you remember that on the 66th Republic Day in 2015, the Bharatiya Janata Party's government had issued the text of the preamble as an advertisement to several newspapers. There also the words secular and socialism were not there; they were omitted. Third example is the removal of preamble in the constitution in NCERT books. That's also been seen. And there are various examples where the Bharatiya Janata Party's government has been seen to be fiddling with the preamble, with the constitution, which is a grave threat to the constitution, which is a grave threat to our democracy. And if the BJP spokesperson is not here, if anyone from our panel inclines towards the Bharatiya Janata Party should tell, is the Bharatiya Janata Party bigger than the constitution, bigger than the judiciary? And saying that the Supreme Court's not infallible. The gentleman speaking before me is not infallible either. What he's saying is not infallible either. And what we want to say here is that the Supreme Court has made it crystal clear that it's part of the basic structure, that it's socialism is welfare state. What's left to be debated? But the people of the Bharatiya Janata Party haven't clarified their stand. And we really would want to know from the Bharatiya Janata Party why this politics of convenience, why staying mum over such matters. But when it comes to your actions, the Bharatiya Janata Party does anything and everything against these words. For example, CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. For example, words from the Prime Minister while he was campaigning.
Let me just come in at this point. Harshpreet, let me just come in at this point. Let me get in Karan Verma. Karan Verma, Harshpreet Kharial has made certain instances. He's referred to certain instances that were, of course, hugely debated as well. Now, some may say, listen, there is a preamble that's existing, there is a constitution that's existing. You may want certain changes to it, but as long as it is existing, that's the form that needs to be perpetuated. Karan Verma.
So from 1950 to 1976, when we had the 42nd Amendment, these two words never existed. So were we not secular at that point of time by your definition of secular? Of course we were. Of course, everyone had a right to practice their religions, and there was equality amongst religions and their practices. Nobody was targeted for that, as per law at least. And he said, the copies of Constitution were distributed, which did not have them. That's the problem with Congress. They don't fact check. The original copies of Constitution, as a mark of honor for that day, were distributed, and the original copies did not have these two words. This is a fact on record. I mean, who can contest that? And thirdly, the hypocrisy by Congress saying that, oh, the Supreme Court is supreme. Well, if there is anyone who's actually overturned the Supreme Court order in the Shah Banu case, and that too very shamelessly, where alimony was not given to a Muslim woman and where you bowed to the clerics, that was the Congress party, the Rajiv Gandhi government. So, you've not respected the Supreme Court. Yes, we are respecting the Supreme Court, but we have every right to argue the case. It is a fact on record that Ambedkar and Nehru, the two people who you say you respect the most, have opposed both these words. This is a fact on record. I just quoted you. So just because you can't dispute these facts, don't come up with limstick arguments that, oh, this is the Supreme Court, you are not infallible. Answer on points, answer on facts. Yes, the Supreme Court has said it. We have to abide by that. But the same Supreme Court, you did not respect in Shah Banu's case, did you? You are not respecting today what Nehru and Ambedkar said. So you
Okay,
are also
we'll
cherry
keep
picking in
Shah Banu
terms of
case for another
legacy.
time, and we have debated about Shah Banu's case as well, Karan Verma. So we have not shied away from debating that. What we
No,
are
I'm not
debating
saying you have
today,
shied
though,
away.
is the
One thing.
Constitution and how the Constitution is being looked at to be amended. Harshpreet Karyal, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Verma, with his absurd arguments, again did not answer the questions that were raised. Is it justified to edit the preamble when the words socialism and secular are there?
Who has said
Is it
this? Who
okay
has
to
said
omit
this?
them? Number one. Number two, now hear
No,
me
no,
out.
they
We are
approached the courts for it. Who has
show
said
some
amended?
manners, show some ethics. Do not
No, I
behave
am
like a
showing some
Bharatiya Janata
ethics. You show some logic
Party.
for a change.
So
Don't
hear
be
me out.
ridiculous.
So hear me out.
Ah.
And not who's
Yeah,
being
please.
ridiculous. Everybody can see that. Now have
No,
patience
you are
and not
making
interrupt.
a
Okay,
fool of
okay.
yourself on
Number
television.
two,
And
the
the fact that you are an
you are
advocate,
already
your
All
clients will
right.
run away.
Okay.
Your
Karan
clients will
Verma,
run away. You
Harshpreet
should stop
Karyal,
arguing this
Karan
way.
Verma, Harshpreet Karyal, I think it's very important that we'll be able to have a discourse despite extremely polarizing and different point of view in a very sane way. Sanjay Hegde, if I can get you in. Allow me to get in Sanjay Hegde at this point. Let tempers just cool down so our arguments can be more understood. Sanjay Hegde, if I can get you in. Sanjay Hegde, here's a question, and I asked this question earlier in the show as well. But I want both of the legal minds to come into this. Sanjay Hegde, there's this whole notion, one, there is an argument that has happened at the political realm, where the political parties are arguing, where there is back and forth political rhetoric. And then there is another realm where increasingly people are engaging in a discourse. So one is the political world, second is the legal world, is what's happening in the court, and third is conversations engaging, emerging in the public discourse, which often may be fact-based, may not be fact-based, may be half understood. In a context where somebody comes up and says that, listen, is India truly secular? Because the ideals for which India stands by is not secular in its nature, is inspired, say, by Upanishads and other books that they quote. And then you have the Supreme Court reiterating that being a socialistic or a secular country is part of a basic structure of the Constitution. The two are extremely different, but very much coexisting in today's India.
Yes, there is an argument which is often made that India is a deeply religious country, and the Indian version of secularism is equidistance and equirespect for all religions. That is, we do not go by the French model of secularism, where any public display of any religiosity is totally banned. So people can't wear Jewish yarmulks or huge crosses. Even there were questions about our prime minister when he went there, how the Sikh turban fitted in with the French ethos and all that. For the public discourse, yes, we are a country which is religious, but we are a country which is constitutionally enjoined to be equally respectful of all religions, to be equally protective of all religions, and also not to differentiate or give preferential treatment to any religion. So you can be a Hindu, you can be a non-Hindu, you can be an atheist, you can be a Pastafarian as well. But that is not the problem of the state. The
Right.
state shall remain at an equal distance and equally indifferent and equally protective.
Deshratan Nigam, do you see eye to eye with this?
Well, Sneha, let me tell you one thing. I gave you few examples, and those are not the examples of equidistant of a state with respect to religion. Certainly not. And nobody has an answer to it. The fact remains that if the majority, and Karan Verma quoted various scriptures where the titles of the Supreme Court, where the first sentences and the other ones, where there is parliament, they begin from our Upanishads. And that is why I say our scriptures are secular in nature. That secularism is inherent in Hinduism. It never calls anybody kafir. It never calls anybody pagans or looks down upon. You have your own way of mode of worship, you do that. We respect, but others don't do that. because it comes from their own scriptures. So that is the beauty of the majority in this country. And it is inherent, and that has to be recognized, that Hindu being a majority, that is why this nation is secular, and that has to be recognized by the Supreme Court.
But
I think
Deshata
the day
Nigam,
will come, the Supreme
Deshata
Court will
Nigam,
recognize
if
it.
somebody's religion allows for that inherently and says you can worship n number of deities, and somebody else's religion is specific about whom to worship, how is that opposing each other?
Let me answer that.
As long as the two can live together.
Let me
As long
answer
as
that
one respects
specifically.
the other and the other respects the other, how is it different?
Now,
Because
let me
that
be-
is not the secularism that India is threatened by.
Let me answer that. If a holy book calls a Hindu a kafir, an inferior citizen, how do you answer that? I'm asking a question. How do you?
Can I come in? Can I come in?
No, please hold
Sanjay
on.
Hegde,
Please
go
hold on.
ahead. Okay,
Please
sure.
hold on. Please hold on.
Let me put it.
Okay.
Let me
A
put
minute
it
more
this
to
way.
Mr.
Let me
See,
put it this way.
I'm raising questions. You know, these questions have
So
not
you
been
Okay,
do it.
Sanjay Hegde, I'm sorry. Let
You
Mr.
don't want
Nigam
answers,
speak.
is it?
Let Mr. Nigam complete it for a minute. Let
No, he
Mr.
doesn't
Nigam
want
complete it
answers.
for
He
a
wants
minute,
to just
and
raise
we'll come to you, Mr.
questions.
Hegde. Mr. Nigam, go ahead.
See, the fact remains,
Yes, we'll come to you, Hegde, irrespective of that, to get your answer. But Mr. Nigam, please answer.
not many people have been able
Please
to
continue.
answer. Not many people have been able to answer the hate speeches, the hate contained in holy scriptures of certain religions. How do you deal with that? That is becoming a problem in India because that is taken as a source of guidance. And that not many people have been able to answer. That is a cause of problems, and we need to deal with it. And the reformative people of all the religions have to come under an umbrella and to have to deal with that situation, because it comes from a book, an authority which a certain section of the people in India are following.
Mr.
In
Nigam,
fact, not only in
I
India,
honestly don't understand how the word secularism is going to solve that problem. But Sanjay Hegde, please respond to the core issue. I don't want to get into religion versus religion. That's not the agenda of this show. That's not what we stand for. What we're trying to understand is, where is this argument of a change or amendment to the constitution emerging? I really want to stick to this course. So Sanjay Hegde, please respond to the inherent questions that Mr. Nigam has raised.
No, his inherent questions, if I go, it is a different debate altogether. I just wanted to point out that there are sections of the Hindus, for instance, the Iyengars, who are strict Vaishnavites, who refuse, and monotheists, who refuse to recognize any other. There are no Shaivites. There are no Shiva. Shiva is not a god. So there are infinite varieties of Hinduism, and it is not as if one political party has a monopoly on its interpretation of what Hindutva is. That's point one. Now don't interrupt. The second point, as far as you are concerned, as far as the constitutional underpinnings of secularism is concerned in this country, the Supreme Court has basically said, look, you can amend any provision in the Constitution, including the preamble, as long as you do not affect the basic structure. Secularism is part of the basic structure. We said so in 13 judges in Keshavananda. We've said it again in Bombay with 9 judges. So it is now far beyond 2 judges of the Supreme Court to strike it down. Parliament, if you want to do it, please try. Be our guest. We might strike it down on basic structure.
Okay, very quickly, I want to go to both Karan Verma and Arshpreet Karyal. I have a minute each to both of you. You know, we're talking so much about the 42nd Amendment. 42nd Amendment also had a very important point, and that is, no political party should be using religion to gain power. We are not debating about, I mean, there is no public discourse about how all political parties have completely dropped their hats on that. Very quickly, a minute each. Harshpreet as well as Karan. Harshpreet first.
Number one, I want to clarify a few things. Mr. Verma said here that the original copy of the Constitution was distributed.
1 minute only,
I don't understand where this confidence is coming from, because the then Union Law Minister, Mr. Arjun Ram Meghwal, said, and I quote him for word to word, we might have distributed original copies of the Constitution. Might have is the word of the law minister, number one. Number two, we really need to understand one thing. Original copy will not be a copy that does not have the latest amendments. Please understand that. Original copy would be that has all the latest amendments in it. Number three, I want to ask from the from Mr. Verma, since the questions that were posed to the Bharatiya Janata Party, you try to answer them. Please tell us one more thing. Why is the preamble missing from NCRTs? Why was there, why in the advertisement on the Republic Day celebration did not have the word socialism and
Okay, these are
secularism?
a lot
And
of
then not just
questions.
that.
I have only 1 minute to give Karan
Just one
Verma.
last thing.
So
Just one
Karan
last
Verma,
thing.
go ahead, respond.
I'd urge him to have the patience
can I
in his time.
speak?
Otherwise,
Harshpreet, I don't have time. Harshpreet, I don't have time. Let Karan Verma speak.
Sure.
Let Karan Verma speak. I gave you your time. Karan Verma, go ahead.
So firstly, Arun Meghwal is right in saying maybe, and then later he confirmed that it was indeed the original copy, and the original copy is absolutely original, which doesn't mean that it will have all the amendments that have been brought in, especially by the Congress, 80 plus amendments. So that is number one. So yes, this was the original copy, which did not have these two words, which were repudiated by Ambedkar ji and Nehru ji also.
NCRT.
Secondly, time and again, Mr. Hegde said that all religions are equal. There should not be condescension for the other.
Why is the preamble not there in NCRT?
Please, Neha,
Answer that. You'll taste the same medicine now. You
Harshpreet,
interrupted
let Karan Verma
now.
finish.
Why is the
Harshpreet, let Karan
preamble
Verma
missing in
finish, please.
NCRTs?
Harshpreet,
This is
let
not
Karan
fair.
Verma finish.
I
Harshpreet,
just have
please
one
respect
question.
this.
Why
Let
is
Karan
the
Verma
NCRT
finish.
missing? Why is the preamble missing in NCRTs? Please answer that.
Harshpreet,
missing,
let
it's
Karan
wrong.
Verma speak. I don't have time on the show. I can't continue
But
like
have
this.
him
Karan
answer
Verma,
this.
please finish.
But have him answer this. Why is the preamble missing in NCRTs?
Okay, so I don't know about the NCRT. If you're saying it's missing, it's wrong. It should not be missing. Let's be honest about it. But it's
Exactly.
not, at least the original copies that you said was a complete lie. It wasn't so. It was the original copy that was distributed. Now, coming to what Mr. Hegde said, that, all religions are the same. Fine, all religions are the same. But Sneha, when you have one religion going through a loudspeaker 5 times a day saying that there is only one God worthy of worship and none other worthy of worship, then that is condescending to the 24 Tirthankars, to all the gurus, to all the 33 Koti Devi Devta which others worship. That is the distinction, Sanjay Hegde. We don't say others are not worthy of worship. We don't claim to be holier than thou.
Okay, I think I'm totally out of time, but Karan Verma, religions, communities from different groups. No, I think I've given each of you the time. It's time for me to sum this up. I think in India that we all have lived, communities have lived together, religious differences have always stayed, but there's been respect. And one thing that comes out very clearly is secularism, socialism is part of India's basic structure. But as the political discourse and arguments goes, for now, it is a basic structure. We'll have to see how this debate goes forward and how the courts look into it, because definitely the political parties have not had a last word on it. Hopefully, Indian Constitution does. Karan Verma, Harshpreet Khadeyal, Deshratan Nigam, as well as Sanjay Hegde, thank you very much for your precious time on a very important discourse. Thank you.